Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, WeatherTech, and by Rain-X, Hum by Verizon, and State Farm. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome to MotorWeek Podcast 192.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, I know. I'm John Davis, and I'm not going to talk very much. I'm going to leave it all to writer-producer Brian Robinson.
Definitely don't leave it up to me.
And online content coordinator Greg Carlos.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ready for that either.
Come on, guys. Writer-producer Garick Zikan.
Thank you for having me.
And video producer, editor, and the producer of these podcasts, Joe Ligo.
I could talk all day, but you know that.
Yeah, we know, Joe.
We know Joe. All right, we've got a viewer question about hydrogen as fuel, and we've all been discussing that subject before we started taping. We've got an SUV comparison test, but first, Greg, you just got back from a trip to Bahrain to drive the Porsche Panamera. Now that you've gotten the sand out of your shoes, why don't you tell us about it?
Where is Bahrain?
It is just north of Saudi Arabia. It's a island country, kingdom, and really small, but they've actually built up a lot of the island, so it's actually bigger than it is naturally. But we're talking about the car, and it is another Porsche Panamera. And I looked on the site, and there's now 18 different Porsche Panameras you can buy, and it's actually not too far off from 911s.
Slicing the onion thinner.
This is the GTS, and basically Porsche's GTS badge mixes track and street credibility. So somebody who kind of wants a little bit of this, a little bit of that, that's probably the model.
Doesn't it just basically take a lot of the most popular features from the base car and make them as a package? Isn't that primarily what
Exactly, yeah. I mean, they're trying to entice people who want, like I said, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and put it into one car.
Yeah, same formula they did with 911, and then Boxster came in now.
And it works well, because it's not, we're not talking what a GT2 RS is to the 911, where it's purely performance and you've only got sport bucket seats or like nothing on the steering wheel. There's actually new technology inside for the GTS, which will roll out to the rest of Panamera, I think, which is head-up display, which is, it's intuitive to change the system because you can actually drag and drop in the main screen and literally make the exact head-up display that you want.
Oh, really?
G meter, temperature, navigation, which is really easy to use.
So you can, as long as you have enough time to sit there, you can make it look like whatever you want.
It's something you do while you're not driving, for sure. But once you get it up and you get it the way you like it, there's no reason to switch it. That does have the same problem a lot of other systems have, where if you're wearing polarized glasses, you have to move your head around like a crazy person to even see it. So that's kind of a bummer. But performance, let's talk about that. Twin turbo V8, it's a 4-liter, replacing the 4.8-liter naturally aspirated from the original Panamera GTS. 453 horsepower, 457 pound-feet of torque. And I could be a little bit wrong on those because I was using some European and North American press kits, so there was a little discrepancy in horsepower.
It's got plenty.
It's got more than enough. But ironically, since we have driven a ton of Panameras, this is going to sound terrible, but I was like a little underwhelmed by the power on the track because I was remembering the Turbo SE Hybrid Sport Turismo, which has like 600 and some horsepower. But for everybody else, this is going to be more than enough. It sounds great. You get standard sport exhaust, standard sport chrono package, which includes all the driving modes, standard air suspension. Now, of course, this all comes at a price. It's like $128,000 for the sedan. Add a few more thousand for the Sport Turismo.
So you can get it in both body styles.
Yes. Right. Yep, both body styles. I personally lean toward the Turismo, Sport Turismo, just because I think it looks better, proportions are better, and it's a little bit more usable. You can get that in a, what do they call it? 2+1. Yeah, 4+1 or something, because you can get the rear seat as a bucket or a bench or two seats, and then you could ostensibly put somebody in the middle, but you won't.
Or some child or something back
there. As far as on-road manners, there's nothing to complain about. It's a little tighter than a standard one, but honestly, for my money, it's as comfortable. I mean, we're talking about a Porsche here. And then track work is just better than a sedan this heavy deserves to handle. Again, not quite the level of a turbo or e-hybrid, Turbo SE hybrid, but like we said before, this is mixing two worlds, not going in one direction.
I want to change the subject to our next car, which you could probably, by my calculations, almost buy 4 of the base model for what you just paid for one of the Panamera GTSs. And that's the 2019 Genesis G70, available with 2 powertrains, the 2-liter Turbo i4 and also 6. And though it's based on the Kia Stinger, you can get a manual transmission with the 2-liter turbo rear drive only, and not the 3.3-liter V6. Having said that, we've both driven the G70. We've driven the Stinger. What do you think? Is it basically just badge engineered, or is it a different car?
It's not entirely a different car, but it's very different. The wheel, I don't know, it's shorter than the Stinger.
It has the classic European sports sedan stance, I think, when you look at it from a profile. Better than a Stinger.
Has a similar layout to the interior. I mean, I looked at that instrument panel and thought,
all day
that's kind of lifted. But I also think they drove like different cars.
Yeah, the G70 is a little softer, but I haven't spent a whole lot of time in the 2-liter Stinger either. So it's hard to compare because I've only driven the 2-liter G70. So,
Joe, did you have a chance?
I got to say, Greg, we actually met up over the weekend, and Greg brought.
Wow, in Bahrain.
In Bahrain.
No, Greg brought it. I liked it better than the Stinger. And I get what you're saying. You can't. Some of the Kia influence is like visible, but man, I think it looks better than the Stinger. It has
really okay.
Like other Genesis products.
You like big grills, I know.
Well, I don't. Yeah, like other Genesis products, it does have sort of like you can see. Well, it's got a styling cue here that looks kind of German or a little Asian. Like it doesn't quite have a strong personality looks wise, but I really did like it. It looks small and fast. I like that it's just a little bit tinier than the Stinger. I think that as a guy without any kids or whatever, if I was shopping for a sports sedan and wanted something a little different, I think it would appeal to me. And I was also impressed the quality of the interior materials. I was feeling around. I was like, wow, this is like real metal, real aluminum on some of the trim pieces and stuff that other car companies would maybe go the cheap route and have plastic. They had real metal, and that impressed me.
I agree that it had a nice luxury tint to it. I guess my feeling was compared to the Stinger, I thought it felt heavier. Not necessarily good, stable heavy, but just heavy. Like the 2-liter, which I thought was perfectly fine and really quite a joy. And the Stinger seemed like it was struggling a little here, but I seem to be in the minority. I know I drove it first up at North American Car of the Year drive-off, and I was certainly in the minority there of people that found anything wrong with it. I think it's a very good effort from them. So
to me, it was more of like a grown-up Stinger.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah.
Again, like Brian said, we didn't drive the 2-liter Stinger very much, but I agree with you. I think the power from the 4-cylinder is good. It's not great. Nobody's going to be impressed by that power. But if you were to hop up into the twin turbo V6,
that's terrific.
I think
it's terrific.
Be impressed by that.
Yeah, along those lines, I was just over at the Kia dealer, and he said they do not sell any 2-liter Stingers.
Even though that's,
everybody,
of course, the margin line, the baseline of all European sports sedans. Everybody wants to talk about the 2-liter turbo. The fact is, Americans really aren't impressed.
Right.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious if we'll get a chance to drive the manual transmission one. Sadly, the G70 that we got is an automatic car.
That could turn that engine into a lot of fun, just being able to shift your own gears.
Yeah, I did drive it. I thought it does make a difference. We've got one on order. We'll see it. Hopefully, see it here fairly soon on MotorWeek.
All righty.
All right, let's move on to the 2019 Jaguar I-Pace, the first all-electric vehicle from Jaguar, and basically beating Mercedes and Audi to the punch when it comes to an all-electric crossover. 90-kilowatt battery, about 234 miles. I think that's based on the EPA cycle, 0 to 64.2 seconds. I think we've all driven it a little, I trust. What do you think? Is it more Jaguar, more EV? Does Tesla have anything to worry about? Is this a new era? What do you think?
It doesn't have the brain melting acceleration of a Tesla, but it's still really good. It's
4.2 seconds
right.
is not shabby.
Right. It's I really enjoyed driving it. I love that feeling of just sort of limitless power from zero. That is such a cool feeling that you can only get in an EV, and I did love that. And we say in the road test, because I just edited the road test for it, we say in the road test that, it doesn't scream EV at you. And I think that's kind of the car's strength, is that you could get in it and never know, really, unless
Until you try to fill it up.
Right. But the problem is, does that appeal to buyers? Because EV buyers, Tesla buyers love nothing more than to tell everybody that they drive an electric car. So my question is, will that be... While to an automotive journalist, that seems like a good thing that it doesn't scream EV. Will that be a problem for customers?
Well, that's been the question we've been asking since the Prius came out. And in that case, when it came to hybrids, looks did matter. But this is such a beautiful machine.
I think Jaguar is making a point that this is the future of their brand, and they want to appeal to current Jaguar buyers and those interested in the Jaguar brand, to the point that they put their corporate face on it. It looks like every other.
Doesn't need a grill, but it's got one.
Jag, and so I think they're happy. That's what they're going for, is to not be an EV, but rather the future of Jaguar. And I struggle with calling it an SUV or a crossover.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's more like a hatchback.
It's all-wheel drive, but it's not that big. Although it does have a ton of room in it.
Yeah.
There's nothing really SUV-ish about it.
People want to compare it to the Model X, but really
Much
it's a
smaller.
Model S competitor.
It's a model. Well, yeah, you could say it's kind of like the Model 3 wagon that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I was really blown away by it, honestly.
Yeah,
I thought it was beautiful outside. It was beautiful inside.
It's got a bit of a shooting brake look to it, even though it's a four-door, but it just has
They make that point in some of their press material.
The seats look uncomfortable, but are really comfortable somehow. Driving it is just great on the highway because it's quiet. I mean, even when you're lacking engine noise, it's not all that loud with road noise or wind noise. The infotainment is kind of still Jaguar-ish, so it's not top level, but again, it presents well. And if you're looking to impress people, which I imagine a lot of Jaguar buyers, especially Jaguar EV buyers, are, you're certainly going to impress other people with it.
And at $70,500 approximately, it's a lot more affordable than all but I think it's either the base or one level up Model X in Tesla. But now that Audi and BMW and Mercedes and BMW have all announced electric EVs, it's going to be quite a battle for that market.
And kudos to Jaguar for coming out before them, because that's kind of a big deal that I don't think a lot of people are noticing.
There was one story, Greg, you told me you did try to go to a fast charger, but that didn't work.
That's a bummer around here. So out near our track at 7580, there is a DC fast charger at a Royal Farms. I went there and tried to use it. It wasn't working. I even called up, I'm blanking on the charge point.
Yeah.
And they said, we can't get it fixed. Next closest one is 50 miles away in Gaithersburg. I'm like, well, that's kind of not going to work for me. So hopefully infrastructure will keep up.
Still not quite there, man.
We've been coming down in price, and I want to come down in price again. We did just recently concluded with Cars.com a subcompact SUV challenge, and now we're talking about vehicles that mere mortals can afford. And Garick was the point man on that shoot. Why don't you tell us about the vehicles and the results, and it's all yours.
So we had 4 in this category, 4 contenders. The winner was the Subaru Crosstrek, which won.
Surprise.
Yeah, which won when they did this about 3 years ago. Number 2 was the Nissan Rogue Sport. 3 was the Hyundai Kona, and 4 was the Ford EcoSport. Joe and I were actually talking about this, that in some of these other comparisons, it seems like that you're almost splitting hairs between some of them. Whereas with these, if you just looked at the Monroney and saw what you got for the money, the cap here was $26,000. It was pretty clear how they were going to rank even before you got
Even before you did anything.
Even before you got in the car, whatever your preference is, just look at what you get. And certainly, people who are shopping for these, they're looking for the most bang for the buck. So, like I said, it was pretty obvious going in. The Subaru One had the most horsepower. Was the longest wheelbase.
That's sad.
Naturally, safety features were a high point. Visibility, interior quality, handling, and ride quality was good. The bad has a CVT, and automotive writers are just not going to like CVTs. Also, it lacks some of the other things that some of the other contenders had, like automatic climate control and power seats, but still came out on top. The next one down was the Nissan Rogue Sport, which, as we pointed out, is known as the Qashqai in other markets.
What was the major thing about it that kept it from the top spot, you think?
It did not have a touchscreen.
Oh, terrible! Isn't
So yeah, for 26, it's one of the judges.
How the world has changed.
Right. Well, one of the judges made a point about that.
It seems kind of like a spoiled complaint, but then when you look at the actual footage, because you came back with a shooter and had all this footage of the cars. When you do look at the center stack in it, it does look old. Man, right. And it's interesting. A lot of these vehicles, the Rogue Sport and the EcoSport, have been in other markets for several years in their current generation, and we're getting kind of an outdated model here.
Well,
in the
that's
US.
also the problem. They've often been tuned for different kind of roads than we have. As I recall, didn't the Rogue Sport ride a little rough, and we know the EcoSport did. Mm-hmm. In comparison to the Crosstrek.
I'm curious, and a lot of other YouTube commenters are curious, and I don't know if I'm revealing industry secrets here, but why was this not a Kicks?
Well, I think that's an interesting point.
It's interesting that in
because the Kicks is the new model
SUV challenge, and remember, these are what manufacturers send us. There's a Subaru Crosstrek, which a lot of people would argue
is an Impreza wagon.
Right.
And then there's the Nissan Rogue Sport, which is fine. It is a subcompact SUV, but that's not their one that goes up against EcoSport.
Sure. I thought about that too. The only thing that I could come out was two reasons. Number one, the Kicks just came out around the time of this.
Right, so it wasn't available probably.
The other is that the Rogue Sport comes with more safety features than you can get on the Kicks. So
and price probably
and for a family vehicle, that's important.
Right, it is. So they probably calculated they would have a better chance in the rankings with that one than I still like the Kicks.
I think everyone likes the Kicks a lot better.
What about the elephant in the room that's not there, and that's the Honda HR-V? I mean, any impression on how it would compare to that?
I really liked the HR-V when I drove it. I mean,
it's kind of old.
I don't know why Honda didn't decide to send it.
That's the funny thing.
They did a revamp of it a year ago, maybe?
A ton of room inside. They've always had the most room in the segment and a lot more flexibility with the Magic Seat. It's noisy and it's a bit of a rough ride, so I'm not sure how it would have came in this. It probably wouldn't have
beat the EcoSport.
It probably still would have trailed the Crosstrek, though.
Yeah, probably.
I suspect.
And I was sad to see the Kona place third. I thought that, I guess some of the complaints from the Cars.com people, since I put the segment together, I saw the footage. It was a little bit smaller, not a ton of cargo room.
It's cool looking, though.
They like the styling. Styling's a big winner for that. But, I guess they chose substance over style in this case.
I thought the Kona has a good driving character. I thought it was kind of fun to drive.
And that was some of the good comments. They liked the handling, the powertrain, the responsiveness of that, but cargo space was a big factor in that one.
Thanks, Garrett. Let's move on to our viewer question. Peter asked, and we've edited this for length, Peter, so don't be offended. Several years ago, there was a push to build internal combustion engines that could burn hydrogen instead of gasoline. We were told that emissions from burning hydrogen were just water vapor at the tailpipe, and I think we even said that a few times. Today, there are multiple vehicles that use hydrogen fuel cells to power electric motors, but none of the hydrogen internal combustion engines have come to market. Can you explain why? Well, I had to go back and start looking at engineering data. And Ed and Joe, just a minute, I want you to add to the one part of his question. It turns out that when you burn hydrogen, which costs let's say 2 to 3 times what a gallon of gasoline is when you look at equivalent measures. When you burn hydrogen in an internal combustion engine, the efficiency is only around 20 to 25%. And that's true no matter what you burn in an internal combustion engine. When you use a fuel cell to convert it to electric power, it's around 60% efficient. So gasoline in an internal combustion engine versus much more expensive hydrogen in a fuel cell gives you about the same cost per mile. So that's why it makes more sense to use in a fuel cell than an internal combustion engine, even though I understand BMW, which was doing research on this 30 years ago, is still looking into it. Now, as far as the water vapor, Joe, you've got an update on that.
I looked up some other data on this question, and it has to do hydrogen combustion engine, hydrogen and air from the environment go in. Hydrogen burns, and yes, it does make water vapor, but if the temperature of the engine is too high, it will also make oxides of nitrogen because the nitrogen in the atmosphere, it's not the hydrogen fuel that's the problem, it's the temperature.
It would be anything that you burn at high temperature.
The nitrogen in the atmosphere and the oxygen in the atmosphere can create oxides of nitrogen.
And that's a no-no. That's what's forced diesels off the market.
Right. That's what's been a problem why we have catalytic converters in gasoline cars. So there's all kinds of issues with operating temperature, and so manufacturers have experimented with lower temperatures and higher temperatures, and it just becomes an efficiency and a cost problem.
Anybody else have anything to add?
It's like everything else in life, just follow the money. If they could make money doing it, they'd be doing it right now. So,
and dum-dum. All right, viewer question. Peter, thank you very, very much for asking it. That was one that we all had to go basically and do some homework on. Before we wrap up, any rant and raves? Anything making you irritated or happy about driving experiences? I'm sitting in a doctor's office the other day, and I'm hearing an older gentleman, he was probably in his 80s, talking about how people drive today. He says, they don't drive cars anymore, they aim them. And I thought that was a pretty appropriate topic. How about it?
Aim blindly, maybe.
No, nothing?
I can only agree with you on that. It makes me glad I commute during non-peak hours, and on the rare occasions I have to come into work early. I'm like, man, it's like
you have to put up with that every day?
It increases my mortality rate, but other than that,
I hope it doesn't decrease your mortality. Anyway,
I'll just keep driving at night when nobody but the deer are on the road.
That's a rough one.
We're seeing people hit those recently too.
Everywhere.
In our parking lot.
In our parking lot. You're telling tales. I'd like to thank our panelists and also our audio engineer David Wainwright today, and our podcast creator Bob Mixter. And Joe, thanks very much for producing today's MotorWeek podcast number 192. Thank you all for tuning in to MotorWeek on public TV stations around the country and also the Velocity Cable Channel. Till next time, I'm John Davis. For all of us at MotorWeek, please don't hit any deer. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, WeatherTech, and by Rain-X. Hum by Verizon, and State Farm.